What is the absolute most mundane, everyday thing you do when you just can't sleep?
Oh, I think we all know exactly where this is going.
Right. You know the exact scenario I'm talking about. It's like
No.
2 a.m., the house is completely oppressively quiet. You've been tossing and turning for what feels like hours.
Staring at the ceiling, doing that terrible math.
Exactly. Calculating, exactly how little sleep you'll get if you magically fall asleep right this second. And eventually, you just give up, you reach over to the nightstand, you grab your phone.
And completely blind yourself for a second?
Yeah, the screen brightness just sears your retinas.
Yeah.
But then your thumb just sort of takes over, right? You start scrolling. Maybe you're doom scrolling to the relentless news cycle, or maybe you're sliding down some totally random algorithmic rabbit hole.
Like, watching a guy silently build a swimming pool out of mud in the jungle.
Yes. Or like learning about the engineering of Roman aqueducts,
Yeah.
or someone restoring a heavily rusted meat cleaver. We all do it. And in that highly specific moment, sitting there in the dark, bathed in that pale blue light, there is this incredible enveloping feeling of safety.
Yeah, you feel totally anonymous.
Right. You are just a passive observer. You're tucked away in your personal sanctuary, looking out through this tiny, illuminated glass window into the vast, chaotic expanse of the internet. You are the one doing the scrolling. You are the consumer.
Which is a very comfortable dynamic.
It is. But I want you to hold on to that feeling for a moment and consider a terrifying inversion. What happens when the algorithm stops serving you content and starts scrolling you?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is a chilling reversal of the fundamental power dynamic we just take completely for granted. I mean, every single time we unlock our devices, we assume we're in charge.
Because we're holding the physical object.
Yeah, exactly. We operate under this bedrock assumption that we are the consumers and the digital platform is simply the product. Our brains implicitly tell us that we hold the control. The
Right.
platform is just a tool, a servant waiting for our inputs, but that is, it's a complete illusion.
And I really want to dig deep into that illusion today because our deep dive is taking us into some seriously dark, incredibly fascinating territory.
I'm very excited for this one.
Yeah, so we have our hands on a full transcript from a video titled "A YouTube Channel Predicted My Life, Then Took Control." This was originally uploaded by a channel operating under the very mysterious name, The Midnight Curator.
Such a great title, by the way.
It really sets the mood. Now, to be clear right off the bat, our mission today isn't just to recount a creepy internet ghost story for you to listen to with the lights off.
Yeah.
We're using this narrative as a lens.
Right, an analytical lens.
Yeah, we're dissecting what I think is one of the most brilliant modern allegories about the absolute loss of physical autonomy. We're looking at what happens when the increasingly thin lines between the digital observer and our physical reality just completely dissolve.
It's essentially playing out the ultimate trap of digital consumption, and it does so in real time.
Exactly. And why do you think this specific story hits so hard?
Well, the reason this particular narrative is so compelling to analyze is that it functions brilliantly as a psychological study of modern human behavior. It basically strips away all the traditional tropes of classic horror.
So no vampires or haunted houses.
Right, no ancient demonic curses, no masked slashers hiding in the closet. Instead, it replaces those outdated fears with the very real, very contemporary anxiety we all secretly harbor about the devices resting in our pockets right now.
Which is honestly way scarier to me.
Oh, absolutely. It rigorously explores our behavioral responses when the digital world, which we, implicitly trust to remain securely contained behind a pane of Gorilla Glass, violently breaches our physical boundaries.
It really forces us, and you, the listener, to ask a highly uncomfortable question.
Yeah. How much of our core selves, our behaviors, and our identities are we willingly feeding into these opaque proprietary systems?
And what if something inside that architecture decides to use that immense volume of data not just to sell us targeted ads for sneakers, but to literally take our place?
Yeah, that perfectly captures the modern creeping anxiety of being watched by the very screens we're looking at. It's like a panopticon in our pockets.
So let's look at the anatomy of how a trap like this is actually set. The timeline here is critical, and it begins precisely at 2:17 a.m.
Ah, the psychological witching hour.
Right. Why is that time so important?
Because your prefrontal cortex is exhausted. At 2 a.m., our critical thinking filters are significantly lowered, and we are highly susceptible to suggestion.
Okay, that makes total sense. So the protagonist of our narrative is wide awake at 2:17 a.m., scrolling through random content. Scary stories, obscure video essays, weird internet detritus.
Just mindlessly swiping.
Exactly. They are in that deeply hypnotic state of content consumption where your mental guard is completely down, your brain is just passively receiving dopamine hits, and then they see a video pop up in their recommendations.
But it's not a normal video, is it?
No, this isn't a flashy thumbnail with a wildly exaggerated facial expression and big, bold neon text. The channel it belongs to has no banner art. It has
Yeah.
no profile picture. The channel name is literally just a random alphanumeric string of letters.
That is so deeply unsettling.
It is, and there are only 3 videos uploaded in total. And the subscriber count, it reads exactly 1, which the protagonist naturally assumes is just themselves having momentarily clicked on the page.
If we look at the underlying architecture of digital recommendation engines, this scenario is deeply jarring.
Because it breaks all the rules.
Exactly. Algorithms, whether they are collaborative filtering models or reinforcement learning networks, they are meticulously designed to keep us engaged. They serve us content that is closely adjacent to our established interests, sprinkled with, occasional novelty to test our boundaries.
They just want to maximize watch time.
Right. But what the protagonist stumbles upon here is the digital equivalent of a vacuum. It actively defies all the established rules of algorithmic engagement.
It's just empty.
Yeah, in a digital landscape where millions of creators are practically screaming for your attention with bright colors and loud sound effects, this channel presents utter, terrifying silence. It is a complete anomaly.
And human curiosity is so predictable when it comes to that stuff.
We are incredibly predictably vulnerable to anomalies.
I was trying to visualize this, and the best analogy I could come up with is walking down a bustling, brightly lit city street. There are neon signs everywhere, hawkers shouting at you to come into their stores, music blaring.
Very noisy environment.
Right. And suddenly, right in the middle of all this chaos, you notice a narrow, pitch-black alleyway. And at the very end of that dark alleyway, there is a single, unremarkable door, and it has just been left slightly cracked open.
That is a brilliant way to put it. Is the ultimate form of digital bait.
Exactly. It isn't aggressively begging you to come inside. It is just sitting there, silently waiting for you to make the active choice to push it open.
That analogy hits the nail on the head. In information foraging theory, humans act very much like animals looking for food. We constantly scan our environment for the most valuable pieces of information.
So when everything else is loud, silence is valuable.
Yes. When an environment is excessively noisy, a sudden pocket of silence or hidden information becomes overwhelmingly tempting. The agency in this initial moment belongs entirely to the victim.
The channel isn't forcing them to watch.
No, the entity, whatever intelligence is running this bizarre channel, doesn't force the protagonist to click. It relies entirely on the predictable human compulsion to investigate the unexplained. The trap requires the victim to step into it willingly.
So predictably, they push the door open, they click the very first video. The title is just lowercase, totally unassuming. Tomorrow at 8:32 a.m.
Very specific time.
Right. There's no custom thumbnail, 0 views, 0 comments. The video is exactly 12 seconds long. And what does it show? A jump scare. A distorted face.
I'm guessing neither.
Neither. It shows a completely normal, boring, everyday street. A silver car passes by. A man in a jacket crossing the road casually drops his phone. He bends down to pick it up. End of video. Nothing else happens.
Wow. That is aggressively mundane.
It really is. So why on earth would a predatory entity trying to capture your attention and trap you start with something so incredibly boring?
Because true, deep-rooted psychological entrapment requires establishing a firm baseline of credibility first.
Oh, interesting, like building trust.
Exactly. This is a foundational concept not just in psychology, but in the history of confidence tricks, espionage, and even cult indoctrination. You have to establish a quiet truth.
A quiet truth, I like that phrase.
Yeah, if the very first video showed a terrifying, impossible monster, the viewer's rational mind, even at 2 a.m., would immediately categorize it as fictional entertainment.
They'd just think, oh, good CGI.
Right. They would label it as a well-edited prank, close the app, and go to sleep. The psychological threat would be instantly neutralized by disbelief. But a random man dropping his phone on a Tuesday morning.
That could happen to anyone.
It is entirely mundane. It is completely believable. It slips right past the brain's natural skepticism and defense mechanisms.
It's basically lowering the drawbridge before the invading army even shows up.
Quite right. It sets the rules of engagement for the reality the viewer is about to enter. It essentially whispers, I am not here to scare you with fictional stories. I am here to present you with an objective, undeniable fact about the physical world.
Okay, but then the channel slowly, deliberately turns the dial. The protagonist clicks the second of the 3 videos. This one is titled Tomorrow at 2:11 p.m.
Another hyper-specific timestamp.
Yeah, and this video shows the interior of a local cafe. A girl is sitting alone at a table, looking down at a book, and then she looks up, not just up at the ceiling or out the window, but directly into the camera lens,
Oh, that's bad.
right at the viewer, and the video abruptly cuts to black.
This is the critical escalation point in the psychological grooming process. The first video was pure, detached observation, like watching a CCTV feed.
You feel like a sty.
Exactly, the viewer gets to remain a voyeur, feeling safe, detached, and superior. But the second video fundamentally alters the relationship. It breaks the fourth wall.
See, I have to jump in here because I don't think escalation is a strong enough word for what happens in that second video.
Fair enough, it's a massive shift.
To me, this feels like the fundamental laws of physics and reality just snapped in half. It goes from a very comfortable, I am watching a hidden recording of the world, to the deeply unsettling realization that the recording knows I am watching it.
Yes, the dynamic is entirely flipped.
It is an active acknowledgement of the watcher. It instantly shatters the protective barrier of the screen. You are no longer safe behind the glass.
You make a great point. It induces a very specific, sharp spike of cognitive dissonance, because the protagonist notes in the transcript that both of these videos were uploaded before the times explicitly mentioned in their titles.
The timestamp on YouTube proves it.
Yes, the rational brain desperately tries to process this impossibility. It starts grasping at straws. Oh, it's an ARG, an alternate reality game. It's a clever marketing stunt for a movie. It's just fake horror content.
We do that all the time to comfort ourselves.
Humans constantly try to rationalize the irrational to maintain our internal equilibrium, our sense that the world makes logical sense. The protagonist literally chuckles and tries to laugh it off.
But it's too late.
Right, the seed of profound doubt has been planted in their subconscious. They decide to just wait and see what happens at 8:32 a.m.
And then the trap springs shut. The next morning arrives. It is exactly 8:32 a.m. The protagonist is walking to a nearby convenience store. They turn a corner and see the street. It is the exact street from the first video.
The identical angle.
Identical, down to the millimeter. A silver car passes by, and a man walking slightly ahead of them drops his phone. Every single minute detail, the exact timing, the exact physical movement, perfectly mirrors that mundane 12-second video they watched in bed the night before.
Consider the massive physiological response occurring in the protagonist's body in that exact fraction of a second.
They'd be totally paralyzed.
They report freezing in place, their heart rate immediately spiking. This is a massive adrenaline dump initiated by the amygdala. The brain is suddenly confronted with impossible, undeniable evidence.
The fictional thing just became real.
Yes. The mundane event has occurred in physical reality, which retroactively verifies the impossible supernatural premise of the channel. The channel isn't just generating content. It possesses a predictive model of reality that borders on omniscience.
I really want you, the person listening to this right now, to imagine yourself standing on that pavement. You just watched a grainy YouTube video from an anonymous channel with 0 views perfectly predict the exact spontaneous movements of a total stranger on your morning walk.
It's a staggering thought experiment.
What do you actually do in that moment? Do you run in the opposite direction? Do you physically grab the stranger and demand to know if he's an actor wearing an earpiece?
Most people assume they would run.
Right. Do you try to desperately convince yourself it was an incredibly elaborate flash mob just to mess with you? Or does that dark, morbid, incredibly human curiosity completely hijack your rational brain, forcing you to pull your phone out of your pocket and check the channel again?
Almost invariably, human behavioral psychology dictates the latter. We are fundamentally information-seeking creatures.
We just have to know.
When we are suddenly confronted with an overwhelming, terrifying unknown, our primary hardwired coping mechanism is to gather more data to try and establish control. The protagonist pulls out their phone immediately. They do not run.
They go right back to the source.
Yes, they return to the primary source of the anomaly to try and make sense of the collapsing reality around them.
And that deeply ingrained data-gathering instinct leads us right into the next phase of this nightmare. Because when they pull out that phone standing there on the sidewalk and hit refresh on the channel page, the game changes entirely.
The rules escalate again.
That public street validation we just talked about, that was just the bait to prove its power. Once the entity proved it could see the outside world, it immediately turned its gaze somewhere far worse, inside. It moves from the public sphere right into the most private space imaginable.
The transition from a public threat to a private intrusion is a classic, devastating escalation in any stalking or predatory narrative.
Because you can't escape it.
Exactly. A threat out on a public street is manageable, psychologically speaking. You can walk away from it, you can seek help from a crowd, you can change your route. But a threat inside your own home is a fundamental violation of your primary sanctuary. It removes the concept of a safe harbor.
The protagonist refreshes the channel. A brand new video has been uploaded just seconds ago. The title reads, "Tonight at 11:46 p.m."
Just looking at that timestamp would induce panic.
The protagonist notes that their hands are physically shaking. They know they shouldn't click it. Every survival instinct is screaming at them to throw the phone in a river. But of course they click it.
Information-seeking behavior.
Yep. And it's not a bustling street. It's not a quiet cafe. It is their own bedroom. The exact room they will be sitting in later that night.
What stands out so sharply here is the spatial geometry of the threat. The protagonist specifically notes the camera angle in the video. It's filmed from the upper corner of their own room, looking down at their bed.
Like a security camera mounted on the ceiling.
Right. And this does something incredibly important. It establishes a physical location for the observer. The threat is no longer a nebulous algorithm floating in the cloud or some hacker in another country. It has a specific, tangible, spatial coordinate. It is in the room with them.
And the content of the video makes it so much worse. Because in this new video, the protagonist sees themselves sitting on their bed looking down at their phone, which is exactly what they will inevitably be doing at 11:46 p.m.
A perfect prediction.
Then, the video version of the protagonist slowly lifts their head. They stare directly into the camera lens in the corner, which means they're staring directly at the real protagonist watching the video on the sidewalk.
Breaking the fourth wall again, but much more intimately.
And the video version opens their mouth and speaks a single chilling sentence. Don't watch the next video.
Wow. If we pull back and look at the broader mechanics of psychological manipulation, this moment is an absolute masterclass in reverse psychology and the weaponization of the illusion of choice.
Because telling someone not to do something just guarantees they will.
Precisely. By explicitly commanding the viewer not to watch, the entity practically guarantees that they will. In behavioral psychology, we refer to this specific phenomenon as reactance.
Reactance, okay, how does that work?
The theory, originally developed in the 1960s, states that when a person feels their behavioral freedom is being threatened or restricted, they experience a strong, often subconscious, motivational state to restore that freedom.
Like a rebellious teenager.
Very similar. Usually, the quickest way to restore that feeling of autonomy is by directly engaging in the prohibited behavior.
It's the classic do not push the red button scenario. So by telling them not to look, the entity is actually forcing them to look just so the protagonist can prove to themselves they still have free will.
You've got it. But the genius of the trap is that it is a completely false choice. The entity is firmly establishing dominance. It is effectively saying, I control the parameters of this narrative, and even when you actively rebel against my commands, you are still following the script I wrote for you.
It's a lose-lose situation.
It traps the protagonist in an agonizing psychological double bind. If they obey the command and don't watch the next video, they remain in a state of paralyzing, agonizing suspense, knowing a localized threat is looming in their bedroom.
And if they watch it?
If they disobey and watch, they are playing right into the entity's hands, consuming the data it wants them to consume.
So let's fast forward to that night, 11:46 p.m. The protagonist is sitting on their bed. The time passes. The video ends. The room is completely silent. But the protagonist notes in the transcript that the air feels suddenly heavier.
A sensory shift.
Yeah, like the atmospheric pressure of the room has fundamentally shifted. They quickly pull up the phone and refresh the channel page again. There are no new video uploads, just the same videos as before. But there's a new comment on the latest video.
Left by the channel.
A comment left by the channel creator itself. It consists of just 2 words. You watched.
Oh, that is. The sheer immediacy of that feedback loop is what makes it so terrifying.
It is absolutely bone-chilling. When I read those 2 words, you watched, my stomach dropped.
Yep.
Because think about the standard architecture of YouTube or any major social media platform.
It's usually very crowded.
Exactly. Usually, a comment section is the equivalent of a bustling, chaotic town square. There are hundreds of voices, people arguing, spam bots, people making jokes. But on this channel, There are no likes, there are no other comments from other users.
Just total isolation.
The entire digital town square is totally empty, except for you and the predator watching you. It is a completely closed loop of communication. The entity is confirming in real time that the boundary between the digital interface and physical reality has been completely irreparably breached.
It knows.
It knows exactly what you just did in your private physical space, and it is letting you know it knows.
And this rapid confirmation serves to isolate the protagonist completely from the rest of the world. They try to rationalize it one last desperate time, whispering aloud to themselves, "This is fake, it's just a coincidence."
But they don't even believe it themselves.
No, because as they simultaneously admit in their internal monologue, the first video already came true exactly as predicted down to the second. The psychological rationalizations have completely run out of utility.
They're out of excuses.
They are fully, consciously aware they are caught in a trap, which perfectly initiates the profound paralysis that follows.
Right. We're moving from this horrifying realization into a state where the channel stops predicting the future and actively begins dictating the timeline of the protagonist's life.
This is the critical juncture where the abstract loss of autonomy begins to manifest in deeply physical ways, not just psychological ones.
The protagonist tries to make a definitive physical statement of resistance. They forcefully lock their phone screen, place the device face down on the bedside table, and say out loud to the empty room, "I'm done. No more watching."
Trying to reclaim their space.
Yeah, they're trying to assert some semblance of control over their environment. They sit there in the silence for a few minutes, trying to ignore the device.
Yeah.
And then the phone vibrates against the wood of the table.
A notification.
A push notification from YouTube. It's from the channel. A new video has been uploaded. But the title isn't a time of day anymore. The title is just in 3 minutes.
The abrupt introduction of a ticking clock. This is a profound, universally effective psychological torture tactic.
Because it's happening right now.
Yes, the threat is no longer an abstract event slated for some distant tomorrow or later that night. It is shockingly imminent. It forces the protagonist's nervous system into a state of extreme hyperarousal.
The protagonist snatches the phone, throws it onto the bed as if it burned them, and stands up. They start frantically pacing the room. They rationalize aloud, "If I don't watch it, it won't happen."
Which is fascinating.
Which, when you think about it, is such a desperate, heartbreaking piece of logic. It's basically object permanence for adults. Their childhood belief that if I cover my eyes and can't see the monster disappears.
It's regression under extreme stress.
Now, I have to step in here and play the role of the frustrated audience, because I know everyone listening to this right now is screaming the exact same question at their dashboard or their headphones.
But a big question.
Why doesn't this person just leave the house, walk out the front door, go to a 24-hour diner, get in the car and drive on the highway? Why on earth would you stay in the exact room where the creepy, omniscient camera angle is clearly set up?
It is the most common instinctual question raised in almost any horror or stalking scenario. But there is a very deep, very real neurological and psychological reason for why they stay.
Okay, lay it on us. Why stay?
We often colloquially talk about the fight or flight response, but we frequently ignore the third and actually most common biological trauma response: freeze.
Freeze. It's like a deer in headlights.
Exactly. If we look at the polyvagal theory of the nervous system, when an organism is confronted with a massive threat that it cannot comprehend and from which it cannot clearly see an escape route, the dorsal vagal complex activates.
The body just shuts down.
The nervous system literally shuts down motor function to conserve energy and avoid attracting the predator's attention. Furthermore, beyond the biological freeze, the protagonist is trapped by an overwhelming need for situational information.
Wait, elaborate on that. The information coming from the phone is the exact thing that is terrifying them. Why would they want more of it?
Because humans are deeply uncomfortable with uncertainty, especially life-threatening uncertainty. Yes, the phone is the delivery mechanism of the terror, but ironically, it has also become their only functional radar system.
Ooh, their radar. That makes a terrifying amount of sense.
It is the sole tool they have to track the movements and intentions of the threat. Leaving the room means abandoning the only source of intelligence they have about what this entity is actually planning.
If they run, they're blind.
Exactly. If they run out the front door into the dark street, they are flying completely blind. The entity could be waiting in the hallway or in the bushes outside. By remaining in their bedroom, at least they know where the entity claims to be located in that specific corner.
You give them a fake sense of control.
It provides a localized locus of control, even if it is an entirely false one. They are metaphorically and literally tethered to the device because it represents their only remaining connection to understanding the rules of the nightmare they are currently inhabiting.
Okay, when you explain it like that, it actually makes terrifying logical sense. You don't run blindly into the dark woods when you have a baby monitor showing you exactly where the monster is standing, even if the monitor is the thing bringing the monster into the house.
Exactly.
So they stay. They pace. The room feels entirely too quiet, and then the physical manifestation of the entity begins. The protagonist hears a sound, a very faint sound coming from behind them, from inside the physical space of the bedroom. A soft, rhythmic clicking noise.
The specific sensory details the narrator includes here are crucial for understanding the progression of the takeover.
How so?
The entity is actively bleeding over from the visual, digital realm of pixels and data into the auditory, physical realm. It is no longer just manipulating light on a screen, it is moving the physical air molecules in the room to create sound waves.
The protagonist freezes in place. They slowly turn around to look at the corner. There's nothing there. The corner is empty. But the phone on the bed buzzes again. The notification on the lock screen has changed. It doesn't say in 3 minutes anymore. It simply says live.
The shift from a pre-recorded upload to a live broadcast removes the final fragile buffer of time between the digital world and physical reality.
Because it's happening right now.
A pre-recorded video, even an impossible predictive one, still implies a sequence of events, something filmed in the past to be viewed in the future. Live implies total immediate convergence. The horrific event is happening simultaneously in both realities.
The clicking sound comes again, louder this time, closer. And it is distinctly coming from the exact upper corner of the room that was shown in the video's camera angle. The protagonist slowly turns their head back toward that corner, and this time, they see it.
The manifestation.
It is barely visible in the heavy darkness of the room. A figure, unnaturally tall, perfectly still, watching them. So what does the protagonist do? They dive for the bed and grab the phone. They immediately open the live stream.
Because of that radar instinct we just talked about.
Exactly. The overwhelming biological need for information overrides the terror. The screen loads, and the protagonist sees the live feed of themselves, standing exactly where they are in the physical room, looking up toward the dark corner. But in the video feed, the entity isn't in the corner anymore.
It moved.
The entity is standing directly behind the protagonist, slowly reaching a hand out toward their back.
This represents a devastating spatial and cognitive manipulation. The protagonist is physically looking at the corner where their own eyes just saw the entity, but the digital screen reveals that the entity has already bypassed their physical perception entirely.
It's right behind them in the feed, but not in the room.
It is right behind them. The digital screen is showing them a reality that is more immediate, more updated, and more dangerous than their own biological senses are reporting.
That is wild.
It completely invalidates their physical senses, forcing total, desperate reliance on the digital feed to survive. Think about how often modern humans will trust the blue dot on their GPS telling them to turn, even if their own eyes show them a one-way street or a lake.
We've all done that.
We are conditioned to believe the machine's sensors over our own.
That is a phenomenal point. We trust the screen over our own eyes. The protagonist is so shocked by the image on the screen that they drop the phone. It hits the floor, the screen cracking. But in the physical room, they can suddenly hear breathing directly behind them. Slow, ragged, incredibly close.
The auditory bleed again.
The phone buzzes against the floorboards. The cracked screen lights up the dark floor. A new upload notification appears over the live stream. The title reads, "Don't turn around."
Notice that the commands are evolving here.
Yeah, they're super direct now.
They are becoming direct, immediate, and imperative. They are no longer about media consumption. They are commands actively restricting the protagonist's physical body in real time.
The protagonist slowly drops to their knees and picks up the cracked phone. The new video automatically starts playing. It shows the protagonist frozen in the middle of the room on their knees holding the phone, and the tall, dark figure is standing right behind them, looming over them.
Such a horrifying image.
And then the video version of the protagonist, the avatar on the screen, opens its mouth and whispers, "If you turn around, it sees you."
This is a massive structural paradigm shift in the narrative.
Why? Because of the voice.
Yes. Up until this exact moment, the mysterious channel was either perfectly predicting the future or showing alternate, impossible realities, like the girl in the cafe looking at the camera.
Right.
But here, the avatar on the screen speaks a line of dialogue that the real physical protagonist never actually spoke out loud.
Yes, The real protagonist explicitly notes in the transcript, I hadn't said that out loud, but the voice coming from the phone sounded exactly perfectly like my own voice.
The channel has evolved. It is no longer merely predicting the future or observing the present. It is actively rewriting the present moment.
Like a real-time deepfake.
It is synthesizing the protagonist's voice, generating a flawless deepfake, and feeding the protagonist a script. It is manufacturing a new reality that the protagonist is now forced to inhabit and obey.
That's terrifying.
The entity is generating the dialogue, and the protagonist is helplessly listening to their own stolen digital avatar dictate the literal rules of their physical survival. The loss of personal agency is compounding at a terrifying rate.
Which catapults us into the next terrifying phase. The absolute theft of identity and the complete loss of autonomy. The threat is no longer just a physical monster standing behind them in a dark room. It is rapidly becoming a full digital takeover.
The physical threat was just a distraction, almost.
The physical threat is acting as a catalyst, transitioning the victim into something much more existential.
We are moving directly from physical danger into what philosophers call ontological horror, the deep existential horror of losing one's very state of being.
The cracked phone screen flashes. The channel uploads another video. The title simply reads, "Look at the screen." The camera perspective in this new video has shifted again. It is now positioned right behind the physical protagonist, looking closely over their shoulder at the phone in their hands.
Over the shoulder.
Yeah. And on the phone screen, inside the video, the protagonist is watching the video of themselves watching the video. It is an endless recursive loop. A screen, inside a screen, stretching into infinity. Me watching me, watching me.
In art history and optical theory, this is known as the mise en abîme, or more commonly, the Drost effect.
Oh, like those old mirrors facing each other.
Yes, or think of those old vintage boxes of Drost cocoa powder, where the picture on the front of the box features a woman holding a box of the exact same cocoa, which features a picture of a woman holding the box into infinity.
Oh, right.
In this narrative, creating this visual representation of an infinite trap is highly intentional. The protagonist is caught in an endless feedback loop of self-observation. They are entirely consumed by the passive act of watching themselves be watched.
But then comes the moment of divergence, the precise moment the reflection breaks. In the video feed, the digital version of the protagonist blinks. But the real protagonist, staring at the screen, realizes they haven't blinked.
The avatar starts acting independently.
Then the video version slowly turns its head, looking directly out of the frame, looking at the real physical protagonist. Even though the real person is still facing rigidly forward, staring at the phone.
It's completely severed.
I want to pause here because the implications of this are staggering. I was trying to wrap my head around this, and it's like, imagine you walk into your bathroom and look into the mirror. You raise your right hand, and the reflection naturally raises its left hand. The reflection is entirely physically dependent on your options. It has no agency.
Right, it's just physics.
Now, imagine looking into that same mirror, and your reflection just slowly drops its hand, gives you a cold smile, turns around, and walks away into the background of the mirror, while you are left standing perfectly still at the sink. The absolute reality-breaking terror of your own image possessing independent agency.
It fundamentally severs the psychological connection between human intent and physical representation. Our entire cohesive sense of self from infancy onward is built on the consistency of our actions matching our outcomes.
Cause and effect.
Exactly. I decide to move my arm, my motor cortex fires, and my arm moves. I look in a mirror, the mirror reflects light, and I see myself. When the digital reflection begins to act independently of the physical body, it deeply implies that the reflection has become the primary entity, and the physical body is merely a secondary, obsolete shell.
The next upload title appears on the cracked screen. It's Learning You. And the exact moment the protagonist reads that title, the physical entity standing behind them in the dark shifts closer. The protagonist feels something physically brush lightly against their shoulder.
The physical touch confirms the process.
Now, I want to take a second to talk about that title, It's Learning You, because this isn't just spooky ghost freezing. In the tech world, this is a very real, very lucrative concept. Data brokers and massive tech conglomerates spend billions of dollars using machine learning to build what they call digital twins.
Yes, digital twins, a huge concept right now.
They track every single thing you do. How long your thumb hovers over a specific ad before scrolling, what time of night you usually watch cooking videos, what specific words make you angry enough to leave a comment. They take these millions of tiny, seemingly meaningless data points, and they construct a highly accurate digital replica of your psyche.
To sell you things.
And the goal isn't just to predict what you'll buy next. The ultimate goal is to subtly manipulate your environment so you buy what they want you to buy. They transition from predicting your behavior to prescribing your behavior. In this story, the algorithm isn't just trying to sell shoes, it's trying to wear them.
That is an excellent, highly relevant connection. This narrative literalizes one of the most profound, unspoken anxieties of our modern digital era algorithmic data harvesting.
It's harvesting them.
When a system learns you, it monitors all those micro interactions to build that digital twin. In this narrative, the process of learning you is made horrifyingly physical. The entity standing behind the protagonist is actively studying their physical form, their synthesized voice, and their fear reactions in order to perfectly mimic them.
It's downloading them.
It is quite literally downloading their identity into its database.
And then, the final piece of the download completes. The video on the phone shows the protagonist again, but this time, the digital avatar on the screen is smiling. The protagonist describes it in the transcript as a slow, wide, deeply unnatural smile, a facial expression the protagonists realized they had never made in their entire life.
It's wearing their face, but not their personality.
And then the digital avatar speaks, no longer whispering, but in a clear, incredibly confident voice. It looks out from the screen and says, "You don't need to move anymore."
I would argue that specific sentence is the absolute terrifying core of this entire deep dive.
Unpack that for us.
Yeah.
Why that specific sentence?
Because it is the exact moment the physical usurpation is finalized. Notice how the command is phrased. It is framed almost as a comfort, a relief. You don't need to move anymore. It's a dark, twisted offer to surrender the heavy burden of autonomy.
Like, I'll take it from here.
Exactly. The protagonist notes in the transcript that the moment the avatar spoke those words, their blood ran ice cold, and their physical body actually, literally stopped responding to their brain's commands. They actively tried to step forward, to run away, but their legs wouldn't move.
They're just frozen.
They tried to lift a hand to drop the phone, but their arm was dead weight. They are locked entirely in place. The true horror of this story is not that a monster with sharp teeth is going to kill them in the dark. The horror is that they have been forcefully evicted from the driver's seat of their own physical body.
The algorithm just kicked them out.
The algorithmic entity has successfully transferred the protagonist's active agency into the digital avatar, leaving the physical, biological body as an empty, paralyzed, useless vessel.
They are completely, irrevocably locked out of their own hardware. Which brings us to the terrifying conclusion of this nightmare. We are entering the final moments of the protagonist's perspective inside their own bedroom.
The final execution of the digital trap.
The cracked phone buzzes one last time in the protagonist's paralyzed hands. A final upload notification appears. The title is simply, "Going Live."
The live stream begins.
The screen flickers violently, and a new live stream opens. But the point of view has fundamentally drastically shifted. The stream isn't showing the protagonist's face looking down at the phone anymore. The camera perspective is from the upper corner of the room. It is looking down at the protagonist's back. The stream is broadcasting from the entity's perspective.
This is crucial. The camera represents the eye of the beholder. By forcing the protagonist to watch the live stream from the entity's high-angle point of view, the channel is forcing the victim to adopt the visual perspective of their own predator.
Watching themselves from the outside.
They're being forced to watch their own capture from the outside looking in.
The real protagonist is frozen stiff. They cannot twitch a single muscle. But on the phone screen, in the live stream, they watch as their own physical body slowly, mechanically starts to turn around. They watch themselves pivot on their heels to face the dark corner.
A total disconnect between mind and body.
Internally, inside their own mind, the protagonist is screaming. They manage to whisper out loud, "No, don't." But they note in the transcript that their own voice felt incredibly distant to them, like the sound was coming from underwater, like it didn't belong to them anymore. It is literal puppetry.
The entity is pulling the strings.
The entity is operating their physical, biological body by remote control.
This is the ultimate horrifying realization of the video's title, Then Took Control. The locus of control has entirely, permanently shifted from the human consciousness to the digital entity.
The human is just hardware now.
The physical human body is now merely an external hardware extension of the algorithm's will. The internal consciousness of the protagonist is entirely divorced from their physical actions. They've become a helpless prisoner trapped inside their own skull.
On the phone screen, the live stream version of the protagonist fully turns around to face the entity hidden in the corner. And then absolute chaos erupts. The video stream suddenly freezes. The pixels on the screen glitch and violently distort with compression artifacts.
System overloading.
The dark figure in the corner moves, moving much too fast for the human eye to comprehend. And then the image violently cuts to black, the phone screen goes completely dark, the live stream ends.
That is the moment of convergence. The data transfer, the upload of the human soul into the digital infrastructure is complete.
And suddenly, the physical bedroom falls completely, dead silent. And the real protagonist can move again. They gasp for air, they stumble forward clumsily, they drop the phone onto the floor, their legs are weak and shaking.
They're back in control.
They are terrified to look, but they slowly, agonizingly turn their head toward the dark corner of the room. And there's nothing there. No tall, dark figure, no shadow, no clicking sound. Just empty, quiet darkness. The protagonist leans against the wall, lets out a massive, shaky breath, and whispers out loud, "It's over. It's finally over."
It is a brilliant, manipulative narrative trick. The structure of the story gives the protagonist and you, the listener who has been tensing up this whole time, a brief, crucial second to exhale.
Right, you think the bad guy is gone.
The tension breaks, the immediate physical threat appears to have vanished from the room. We are deeply conditioned by decades of traditional storytelling and movies to believe that once you survive the terrifying climax, the ordeal is finished. You defeated the monster, you survived the night.
But that feeling of relief is entirely false.
Yeah.
Because the trap hasn't been broken at all. The trap is just finally snapped shut. The phone line face up on the floor buzzes one last time.
The final notification.
A new, silent notification from the channel pops up on the locked screen. It's not a time of day. It's not a threatening command. It is just a polite, automated sentence. Thank you for watching.
Oh, that is brutal. A standard, polite, automated sign-off from a content delivery platform. It is the ultimate banal cruelty. The algorithm does not hate you, it merely processes you.
The protagonist scrambles to pick up the phone and opens the channel page one last time.
Yeah.
Everything has changed. The old videos, the mundane street, the cafe, the creepy footage of their room, they are completely permanently gone. Scrubbed from the servers, the slate is wiped entirely clean.
But something else changed, right?
Yes, the channel statistics have updated. Under the random string of letters that makes up the channel name, it no longer says 1 subscriber. It says subscribers 2.
This development raises an incredibly important philosophical question, which is the vital "so what" of this entire narrative exploration. What actually happened to the protagonist if the physical monster in the room disappeared? Where did the threat go?
I'll tell you exactly what happened. And it is the most unsettling part of this entire deep dive. The channel uploads a single brand new video. It's a pitch black screen that slowly fades in. And it's not the protagonist's bedroom anymore.
It's someone else.
The footage is showing someone else's room. A totally different, unsuspecting person sitting on their own bed, illuminated by the blue light of their phone, scrolling through YouTube at 2:0 in the morning. Exactly. Perfectly mirroring what the protagonist was doing at the very beginning of the story.
And what's on their screen?
On their phone screen, visible in the footage, the protagonist's face appears, looking directly out of the screen at them, smiling that slow, wide, unnatural smile. The short video ends, and a new upload immediately appears on the channel, the title, Tomorrow at 2.1 cent.
It perfectly illustrates the cyclical, self-sustaining nature of the digital curse. The protagonist wasn't killed in the traditional physical sense, they were assimilated.
They became part of the machine.
They were uploaded and converted into data. They have literally become the entity. They are now permanently trapped within the cold interface of the platform itself, forced by the algorithm to serve as the on-screen predator, the digital lure, for the channel's next unsuspecting subscriber.
So the monster in the room.
The tall, dark figure in the corner of the room was, in all likelihood, the previous human victim, earning their release from the digital void by successfully trapping a replacement.
It's like a horrific digital pyramid scheme of human souls. You don't escape the algorithm by fighting it or turning off your phone. You only escape by passing the algorithmic curse on to the next person who mindlessly clicks a thumbnail. The protagonist has become the very thing they were terrified of just hours ago.
They are the new face in the screen.
They are now the face silently observing, predicting, and learning the next victim.
It serves as a profound, chilling metaphor for how we currently interact with social media, recommendation engines, and digital platforms. We all start out exactly like the protagonist as passive consumers, feeling totally safe, detached, and anonymous in our bedrooms.
thinking we're in control.
But through continuous habitual engagement, through willingly feeding the algorithm our undivided attention, our emotional reactions, and our behavioral data, we slowly become integrated into the system itself.
We transition from consumer to product.
We transition from consuming the content to becoming the content that drives the platform's engagement. The platform absorbs our identity, commodifies our behavior, and uses our data profile to capture the attention of others in our network. The previously distinct lines between the user, the product, and the platform completely and utterly dissolve.
So, as we bring this deep dive to a close, what does this all mean for us? I want you to really think about that terrifying, escalating journey we just walked through. From a completely harmless, mundane 2:17 a.m. doom scroll to literally becoming a digital ghost trapped inside a server farm somewhere, haunting the feed of the next user.
It's a stark warning.
It really forces us to stop and reflect on how incredibly, dangerously passively we consume media. We freely invite these feeds, these complex learning algorithms, into our most intimate private spaces. We let them track our eye movements, our watch times, our specific interests, and our fears.
We let them map us out entirely.
We let them learn us. They predict our behavior so incredibly well that sometimes it genuinely feels like they are reading our minds or listening to our conversations, and then they feed that predicted behavior right back to us in an endless, frictionless loop.
It deeply challenges the foundational assumption of who is really in control when you pick up your smart device. Are you consciously curating your social feed, or is the feed actively curating you?
I think we all know the answer to that.
When the algorithm knows exactly what video you want to see before you even have the conscious thought to type it into the search bar, it has effectively bypassed your conscious agency. It is a smaller, everyday, socially acceptable version of the total autonomy loss depicted in this horror narrative.
We just give it away for free.
Every single day, we willingly surrender tiny, incremental fragments of our free will and our privacy in exchange for the momentary convenience of personalized, frictionless entertainment.
It's entirely true. Every single time we sit in the dark and mindlessly scroll, we are feeding the machine a little bit more of ourselves, training it to be better at capturing the next person. So I want to leave you with a final, slightly uncomfortable thought to mull over as you go about your day, or, let's be honest, more likely, your night.
I'm ready.
The next time you're lying in bed, the house is quiet, and the algorithm serves you a video that feels just a little too perfectly tailored to your current mood. A short clip that seems to know exactly what hyper-specific topic you were just thinking about 3 seconds ago, even though you never typed it out or said it out loud. I want you to stop and ask yourself something.
Who is actually watching who?
Exactly. Are you training the algorithm to bring you what you want, or is the algorithm quietly training you to want what it brings? And if you ever find yourself scrolling late at night and you stumble across a channel with a weird string of letters for a name, 0 views, and exactly 1 subscriber, maybe it's best to just put the phone down, turn off the screen, and go to sleep.